Oh God, I'm 3 hours late. It's 11 o'clock. Uh, um, so I will take it away. Welcome to our Saturday morning group. I realized as the numbers of people get fewer and fewer, and I get people saying, "Well, I can't present or I can't do this because I'm busy calling a dance," that we started this a little over 2 years ago. And the thought was people couldn't go anywhere or do things because of COVID. So let's get together and do this instead. Um, Now that people think COVID is gone, some of us know it's not, uh, that some people think they should are giving actual calling dances priority to coming in here and having fun. But given that, let's proceed with today's session. You may have heard of a professional organization that I hope you all belong to. It's called CALLERLAB, and there are certain reasons you should join, and the gentleman today is going to be talking about some of those. This gentleman's been calling for 36 years. Um, he calls a variety of programs all the way from SSD to C4, and that's quite a variety. Uh, he tells me he calls 9 times a week. Now, I don't know if West Coast calendars are different or he does multiples.
What I do is on Sunday, I have a plus club. On Mondays, I have an advanced club. On Tuesdays, I have a SSD class and an advanced club. On Wednesdays, I start at 5:30 with a plus workshop and then follow that with a SSD class. Thursday, I start at 3 o'clock with a C2, and then at 4:30 with a C1, then at 7 o'clock with at 4:30 with the C1, and then an advanced for an hour and a half and a plus for an hour and a half. And Fridays, I only call some Fridays a month. And Saturdays, it depends on the Saturday what I'm calling. But I have 9 separate dance sessions regularly every week.
So I was thinking if I took the 36 years of calling and multiplied that by 52 weeks and multiplied that by 9 times a week, that would be a lot of dancing. Anyway, to continue, our presenter today is lives in San Francisco. However, he's didn't want to get up that early, like 8 o'clock. So he's currently in Milwaukee, where he only had to get up at 10 o'clock. And in his spare time, he does things with CALLERLAB. He's currently on the board of governors, and he's currently the chairman of the board of governors of CALLERLAB, which is quite an honor to have him here, and especially to talk about CALLERLAB. Let's have a big hand for Harlan Kerr.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so couple questions. I had actually organized this for newer callers who might not know us much, and I think probably everyone here is a member of CALLERLAB, or at least a high percentage of you. So it might be a little redundant. I almost thought at the last minute when I was watching who was checking in, I'd switch to a different PowerPoint I have that's dealing with difficult situations callers run into. But before I get started, if I've been calling 36 years, that means I've known Joel Ubelacher for 35 years. Yeah.
Harlan, we do have a lot of people, this is recorded and a lot of people get to watch it afterwards also.
Okay.
So some people just can't make it. So I think it's appropriate. And what little I was looking through your PowerPoint, even though I've been a member of CALLERLAB for longer than you've been calling, there are some interesting things to reconsider and rethink about, and good points. So just carry on.
Okay. And is that Charlie? Which Charlie is that?
Charlie Trapp.
Okay.
Oh, hey, Charlie.
Hey.
I was emailing back and forth with Charlie yesterday and said, by the way, what are you doing Saturday mornings? So welcome aboard, Charlie.
You're welcome. Well, it's good to be here.
Anyway, we keep interrupting Harlan.
Okay. So, CALLERLAB. CALLERLAB is a couple of things you should know. It's the international organization of callers. We have members in 21 countries, and we're working on a couple of other countries because there's actually, at last count a week ago, 26 countries where square dancing and calling is taking place. So the countries that I know of that we don't have members in are Russia, which, as I think they're in their second year of square dancing in Russia, kind of migrated from the Czech Republic, and Liechtenstein has dancing now, but does not have a CALLERLAB member. What's that? Two others: Liechtenstein, Russia. I will have to go look. And anyway, so we're trying to reach out to those countries that have dancing but don't have callers yet. I don't know how many of you know the history of CALLERLAB. CALLERLAB began as an official organization in 1974. And what happened then was the year prior to that, several callers got together and said, no, we need an organization, because depending on the caller, you got any calls, your list of calls varied. And it was kind of interesting. And different callers had their own list, particularly like when I started dancing was before there was a official set of challenge lists. So whenever a challenge caller came to town, like if Keith Gully came, you had to know the Gully 100 because he had these 100 calls to use. And Lee Coughlin came, you had to know Lee's list. And so CALLERLAB originally was started as standardized calling, standardized lists, standardized definitions. And it was also initially started, but very much different than today. To be a member of CALLERLAB, you had to be a professional caller. And originally you had to be invited to join CALLERLAB. Now we have membership categories from brand new callers up through people who are professional and everything in between. So we began in St. Louis in 1974. And the next year became incorporated as a not-for-profit in the state of California. And this is a picture of the original 50 who first got together at the first CALLERLAB convention. CALLERLAB has a very concise mission statement, but it kind of encompasses everything we do. The mission statement that was adopted by CALLERLAB about 11 years ago, I think, is to foster the art of square dance calling and improve caller skills. And that's broad enough that it kind of covers everything that we do. We currently have, we're in the middle of membership drive right now. So we have about 850 members. We're pushing really hard in the next couple of months to get back up to around 1,000, which is what we have been in. We're at pre-COVID. So if you haven't joined yet, that's a big hint. And if you know someone who's a caller who hasn't joined, and especially if you teach caller school, something really important has happened. I don't know how many of you teach scholar schools. I teach some. And if you teach a caller school, or if you know someone who's taken a caller school and a member of the staff is a CALLERLAB accredited callers, anyone can join as a new apprentice member, and their first year dues are half price. So if you know any new callers who have taken a caller school with an accredited callers, that's one way to get them into the organization. I found that not everyone is aware of how the leadership of CALLERLAB works. And it's sort of three-branch leadership. The Board of Governors is a large group. It is currently 24 members. And we have members from US and Canada. Mickey's, is Mickey on it? No. And we have US, Canada, and Germany right now. When in the past we've had people from other countries. So the Board of Governors makes big policy decisions. And they have electronic discussions on major items. For instance, the thing they just voted on this week, which goes in effect as of today, it was being sent out by the Home Office, is to change the status of apprentice members. Apprentice members are people who have been calling 3 years or less and call only periodic dances. And they've been able to be members, but they did not have the ability to join committees. They can now join any committee they qualify for and vote on that committee business, which is a big new step for new callers. So that's another impetus to get people who just finished caller school in for half price and being able to serve and vote on committee work. The huge part of the administrative work of CALLERLAB comes from the Home Office. The Home Office does all the day-to-day work. Teresa Berger is the executive director. She's an amazing woman. She does an incredible job. She's brought the Home Office in the past year that she's been executive director into the 21st century. We now have electronic voting. We're going from paper to digital in almost everything we do in the next few months. So there's been some really nice changes at the Home Office. And again, if you have a question and you need to call someone right away, most people will call the Home Office. The executive committee is a committee of 5 people. There's a chair, which is me, vice chair, which is Ted Lasott, and 3 other members, Buddy Weaver this year, Justin Russell, and Bob Riggs. And this is sort of the workhorse committee. We handle day-to-day administrative things and legislative kind of things, and then take our work back to the Board of Governors for approval. You all know about the annual convention. I want to encourage people to attend. This year, we had an in-person convention for the first time in 2 years. We had the year before, we had a virtual convention, and the year before that, the first year of COVID, we actually just didn't have a convention. And the convention this year is going to be in Reno, Nevada, actually Sparks, technically, at the Nugget Hotel and Casino. It's on April 24th through 26th. And I don't know how many of you have been to the convention. Most of you I've seen at conventions one time or another. It's 3 days with important meetings, 36 educational sessions, some dancing, but most of all, a lot of camaraderie and hanging out with your fellow callers and meeting callers you've heard of but never had a chance to talk to face to face. And it's kind of like a family reunion for callers. I would really encourage people to go to the convention. Let me go back here. Almost all of the work that's really done by CALLERLAB is not done by the Home Office. It's not done by the Board of Governors. It's not done by the Executive Committee. It's done by the individual committees. And over here on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see all of the committees that undertake work for CALLERLAB. And I encourage you to join any committee that you are interested in, that you're qualified to join. There's a couple, 3 closed committees, but the rest of them are open. The first set of committees are the program committees, advanced, basic, and mainstream, challenge, plus, and the newest ones, social square dancing. And if you're calling any of those programs, I really, really strongly encourage you to become a member of the committee and participate in committee work. The second group of mission support committees are the accredited coach committee, which is a closed committee. You have to have passed the test to be an accredited coach to be on that committee. Caller training is a really active committee, and they're going through some really big changes right now by developing a caller teacher, square dance teacher certification program and testings, which should be done in the next 2 or 3 months. Public relations, social connections, and ways and means are all open to anyone who's interested in those committee. And same with member support. There's a Callers Partners Committee, which actually does a whole lot of stuff. And if your partners are interested, I would connect them with the Callers Partners Committee. History Committee is really a committee of 2 people that just archives all the historic records for a CALLERLAB. International Advisory is a very active committee. They meet once a month usually by Zoom, and that started during COVID. And actually, in one of the things I did my first year as chair is ask every committee to hold 2 Zoom committee meetings a year aside from their electronic work that they do with home office logs. Knowledge base, we'll talk a whole lot about that in a little bit. Music producers is a closed committee. It's open only to people who actually produce music. Past chairman's committees is only open to past chairman. So on down. So we also have outreach committees. We have a handy capable committee, research and development, and an outreach to the arts. Again, I want to go back to one of the main reasons for forming CALLERLAB was the standardized program lists and call definitions, which allows callers and dancers to travel anywhere, and what's being called and how it's being called is consistent. And one of the big things I always find when CALLERLAB comes up and dancers are around and say, oh yeah, CALLERLAB, you're the guys who change the lists all the time. And in fact, the lists do get changed periodically. They have to be reviewed every 3 years, and there are usually some changes in between. But the change process is pretty rigorous. It takes a 66% vote of the to put a call on the list. It takes a 50% vote to take a call off the list. No more than 3 calls can be added in any given year. That what people say, who takes care of the program list? And the options are: is it the Board of Governors, is it the Home Office? Committee chairs are the committee members, and the answer, of course, is committee members. Committee members have the full say about what is on or off the list for that program. And so the basic mainstream committee determines what's on the list for basic and mainstream. SSD determines what's on the list for SSD, plus, advanced, and challenge. So, and the committees actually take their work pretty seriously on this, and the discussions can be intense at times. Particularly when you're talking about adding a call that's from another list, or a call that's been around forever that some people feel very strongly about keeping. Many years ago now, but there was an issue then BMI and ASCAP became aware of square dance calling. And the fact that square dance callers were using music and were not BMI ASCAP licensed. And it was actually going to be kind of a less than pleasant situation. But what happened is CALLERLAB negotiated long and hard with BMI and ASCAP and negotiated a reasonable rate for licensing for music. Just because a couple of you aren't from the US, you don't need it. But all US callers really must be licensed. And the licensing fee is not that much. We'll talk about that a little later. And it's important to have. I've never heard of anybody yet who's been approached for calling without a license, but it's always a possibility. One of the biggest things about CALLERLAB that people don't seem to know about is that the CALLERLAB Foundation provides both scholarships and grants for caller education. And we encourage new callers, our beginner callers. And again, if you are having a caller school, you might talk to people who are potential students at your caller school about the fact that they can get a scholarship to not only cover tuition for college school, but the scholarship can cover any of three things or all of the three things. It covers tuition, it can be used for housing, and it can be used for transportation to college school. So, and most scholarships are awarded for about $250, but that varies. And if you're a new caller, new callers are people who want to become callers. You do not have to be a member of CALLERLAB to get the scholarship. All you have to be is someone who's attending a school where one of the staff is a CALLERLAB accredited caller coach. And there is a priority when we review scholarship applications. We prefer to give them to people who have less than 5 years experience. So people they've never picked up a mic, have been calling for 5 years and working on improving their skills. The other thing that people are not so aware of is the foundation also gives grants. Like a festival recently applied for a grant, which we awarded, to put on a caller clinic during their festival this fall. So if you have local clubs or local festivals that are happening and you want to put on a caller clinic, you can apply for a grant to do that. You can also talk to CALLERLAB about providing a micro lab at any of your schools, any of your festivals. And there's a new program that's just been approved. And there's mini labs, and then the new one's micro labs, which are small one-day caller clinics at a festival. And you can ask CALLERLAB to provide those. CALLERLAB maintains a huge library of caller training documents. And these include things like the dance program lists and definitions, teaching tips, lost squares procedure, formation arrangement charts, winning ways. And winning ways is a really great resource. It is a compilation from different square dance clubs around the world of what they have done that successfully worked for increasing their membership and increasing their clubs. So I would direct you towards the Winning Ways documents. There's community dance journals, there's site and module resolution systems, and another big thing that's relatively new is a marketing manual that was developed mainly by Mike Hogan on how to successfully market square dancing in your community. And all these are available for free on the CALLERLAB website. Barry Clasper spent a tremendous amount of time working with his committee to put together an amazing knowledge base. It's knowledge at CALLERLAB.org. It's growing literally daily. He works on it almost every single day, and every day it gets bigger. Right now it has over 241 articles that are really good articles in 26 categories. And if you ever have a chance, I encourage you to go to knowledge.callerlab.org and check out the knowledge base. It has an amazing amount of information. We also have teaching resources available free for downloading. Again, definitions, standard applications, call analysis articles, modules, teaching tips, and choreographies for callers who are just starting to get into teaching and might need some help in that area. There's also information on dances other than square dancing, sort of party night dances, community dances, contra and traditional square dancing. Again, all available to download for free. And we now have a CALLERLAB YouTube channel, which has various videos on CALLERLAB events and activities. And I encourage you to go check that out. Again, I want to come back to really, really good resources. The marketing manual on how to market square dancing in your community, and the winning ways documents, in which clubs all around the world have shared how they successfully recruit and keep dancers. So those are two good resources for callers. It's also a CALLERLAB Facebook page, and I think you guys are all aware of that, because there's stuff on that about the Newbie Square Dance Group. Accredited caller coaches. The caller coach accreditation process is really rigorous. I'm in my last phase of it. Hopefully we'll finish it up in the next couple months. It is a really, really detailed curriculum. It takes a bit of time to get through it. It has a series of assessments along the way. You study for a while. You take what's called the mini test to see how you're doing. You pass the mini test, you continue on. You have a written test. You have an essay. You have to develop your syllabus for teaching, and then you have to sit down with 3 accredited coaches for a fairly rigorous oral exam. And at the end of it, you get a certificate of accreditation. If you become an accredited coach, then if you give a caller's school, your students are eligible for half-price CALLERLAB membership their first year. And any accredited coach caller school is available for scholarships. And again, we have lots of money for scholarships, and we like giving them out. So, you know, we're all CALLERLAB, and I encourage you to get involved, attend a convention or mini lab, join a committee, run for the board. And we're always looking for people, and all of you here can do this, to contribute articles for Direction, which is our bi-monthly newsletter. So these are some questions I thought I'd put in for discussion. And basically, for this group, it's a little bit different because there aren't that many new callers here today. But what do you see as CALLERLAB's role for the industry? What could CALLERLAB do? Let me move to be more valuable to you? And what are some ways that we can better serve our members? These are, the last two are major areas of focus in my work this year with CALLERLAB. So, CALLERLAB is dedicated to square dancing's professional leadership and working towards the future. And if you want to get in contact, best way is to contact the home office or go to the CALLERLAB website. And if you haven't explored the CALLERLAB website, particularly the database, the knowledge base, I encourage you to go and just spend an hour or so just looking at everything that's available through the CALLERLAB website. And that's kind of a quick overview of CALLERLAB.
That's great, Harlan.
Hey, John.
John, you said hello to you. You're muted. Wanted to throw in a couple things maybe to get the conversation started and add to one of the things that you said, Harlan, as far as BMI and ASCAP. When they first approached CALLERLAB, I guess the way they normally handle things is the venue that is throwing the event has to pay the fee. And CALLERLAB realized that if every club had to pay a fee, that no clubs could afford that and would not exist. And CALLERLAB's negotiations with those guys made it so that we, the callers, could join and cover it. And anything we did, it put a burden on callers to have to pay that fee, but at least it kept things going and it was handled centrally, and it made it all possible, because if every place you called had to have a license, we'd be in big trouble.
Yeah.
The other thing about changing the levels all the time, before CALLERLAB, Bob Osgood Sets an Order had his basics 50 and his basics 75. And by the time that was published and promulgated, it had changed already. Everybody was using something different. And people acknowledged in CALLERLAB that square dancing is a folk activity and it has to evolve. And that's why the annual changes and or reviews and what have you. It's really been, confusion for people on slight occasions, but really has made a big difference.
John, do you want to say anything? John is chair of the Public Relations Committee.
You mean me? I'm
No, yeah, not public relations, but
vice chair of Ways and Means.
okay. For some reason I had you mixed up with someone who is on public relations. Anyway, but Ways and Means, actually, Ways and Means, just to thank them, they do a lot of fundraising, which mainly goes directly into the foundation and scholarship funds.
Yeah, we auctioned off two record deals for which I think brought in about $3,000 for the at CALLERLAB. So that was pretty good.
Daryl's got his hand up.
He does, yes. Going back to the BMI ASCAP. Now, I just happened to be there at the time that all that took place. And I happened to be on the Board of Governors at that time, for that matter. I never really understood or accepted the idea of the licensing for the callers, because at that time I was also a record producer, back when we had vinyls, of course. The old days. if you look on your old vinyls, and I'm sure most of you have some, if you find one that has BMI ASCAP printed on it any place, I would say you probably have a reason to have that license. If you don't see BMI ASCAP on there, I don't see any reason to have that license. Now, how this is handled through the digital world, I don't know. But as far as the old records, being a producer at that time, I didn't feel that we needed it. It was just an added expense for membership. And you might look into that, Harlan, and see what the actual situation is these days. Now, I will say this, the producers, even today, to produce music that is protected, they have to buy a mechanic's license in order to do that and sell the product. But that has nothing to do with BMI ASCAP. So that's my stand on that. Never have needed it, don't need it today, although I have purchased it every year, just like everybody else.
The other thing that's happening today too is a lot more callers are using music that isn't square dance music producers music. They're using a wider range of music, a lot of which is covered by ASCAP. But
Yeah,
I will take a look at this.
One of the challenges that I have as somebody who has gone through the hassles to figure out what it takes to become a music producer and figured out the licensing on that is that there are a number of musicians, even if you're using CALLERLAB, I mean Square Dance Caller produced music, number of musicians who are licensed by CSAC, which you can get that license through RoundaLab, but a number of musicians who are licensed through GMR, and I can't find any way to purchase that license. And specifically Bob Seger is a GMR license, which is great if your music has a BMI or ASCAP or CSAC co-writing credit, but a lot of stuff is strictly written by Bob Seger, and I can't figure out how to license his stuff.
With that, you might check with Scott Bennett because he's done a bunch of Bob Seger. Just a thought.
Yeah, it's the performance license. The mechanical license is easy, as Daryl points out, but the performance license is a little bit harder to get. But yeah, I'll hit up Scott. That's a good question. Thanks.
So Harlan, you mentioned the value of the marketing manual,
Yeah.
and the knowledge base. We had Mike Hogan on here just a few weeks ago talking about marketing and pushing the manual, obviously. And we had Barry Clasper talking about the knowledge base probably a year and a half ago. I know the knowledge base has come a long way since then, but both those videos are available if people want to go back and look at them. Marketing, as I say, was just very recently from Mike, and just rather than reading a manual, hearing him talk about it and what have you was, and we had him on because I remember him talking at CALLERLAB and doing an amazing job.
So one of the things I find interesting about the marketing manual is running through it and looking at how many of the clubs that report great successes for a year or two are still clubs. And I wonder about that sometimes. I wonder if maybe there's a way we can follow up on that and look at who's actually been successful, because I don't know that they're always making it into the marketing manual. I would like put Redwood Rainbows as a specific example of a very successful club.
One of the few clubs with over 100 members.
Yeah.
And that's happened in the past 4 or 5 years.
That's
What have they done to increase population?
They have 4 things going for them. And this doesn't have to do with increasing population directly, but it frees up their money for other uses. They own their hall. And so they have no hall expenses. So that money can be used. They're in a community that's north of San Francisco. And I don't know if you describe it as semi-rural, small town, but it's a smaller community. And in a lot of ways, they're one of the only shows in town for recreation. So they appeal to a wide range. I have a new SSD class up there, and that started a couple weeks after we were able to start dancing again. Shutdown was ended here, and so it started back in end of February, I guess, and had 3 squares of new dancers show up, and most of them have stayed. All of them except about 2 have stayed, and so they regularly have good class. And part of it is they're very visible in the community. It's a community with not a lot of other options, and they put a lot of effort into recruitment, a lot of effort. That probably everyone in the whole area covered by that town and surrounding area hears that there's a square dance class being held. So they're growing. They've grown from like 40 to over 100 people in the past 5 years.
I think that there are a number of other clubs in the adjoining Santa Rosa area. And I think that there are things about the culture of Redwood Rainbows that are, I don't know, more inclusive or kind of broader, cover a broader social spectrum than the clubs in Santa Rosa. And I noticed that Joe still has his hand up.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, yeah. I've got 2 things. One is new caller recruitment. I've recently relocated into Alberta from Ontario, and in the Calgary, well, in all of Alberta, really, we have a problem with not having any new callers, and our current population of callers, as you noticed by the lack of color of hair or lack of hair, we're disappearing little by little. We need the new callers. One of the things I've noticed with a lot of the caller material is first off, it looks way too complicated to become a caller, just to know all these formations and arrangements and blah blah blahs. We really need 2 things, a circle or lines. Other than that, the heck with the rest. Let's learn how to call and sound like a caller, but we need to know how do we attract these new people? So there might be a good thing to start looking at producing material of like how to do it, how to get new callers, how do we entice them? People like Yolanda, we make her call. She doesn't want to, of course, but we make her do it. So she's one of the newer callers, and there are some, but some of the older callers, they discourage new callers, even to their dying day, because they don't want the competition. What competition? We need them. So that's one thing. The other thing is, and this can probably be tied together, since we're all on Zoom, what about, do we have any material out there about calling on Zoom? I've been calling on Zoom now for 2 years, and there's a number of us that do it, and it's a very successful activity. Yeah, you're not going to get rich at it. I don't know what part of square dance calling is going to make you rich anyhow, but it back in the day, it was a good livelihood, good career. But other than that, so Zoom info, recruiting new callers. What are we gonna do? I'll take my hand down.
Daryl, your hand's up, unless somebody wants to respond to Joe directly.
I will note on the Zoom info that at the beginning of the pandemic, Daryl Clendenin and Tom Dang were doing Zoom things on calling on Zoom. So they might be willing to do something, or they might actually have recorded versions. Over to Daryl.
Yeah, funny you should happen to mention that. We are continuing weekly working with some callers on Zoom. I find it a very useful resource. Just a couple of things. First, Joe, thank you for sending out the information that you did on your session there and that you talked about. Second, I'm glad we're talking about new callers and getting them. Getting them is one thing. Harlan, when I shut up here in a moment, you can answer me, or you can answer me right now. Do we have a committee on a virtual committee within CALLERLAB that is going to research ways to promote square dancing? So that would be one question. Another thing for you, Harlan, is do we have a realistic starter kit for non-callers?
I'll start with the last one. Yes, we have a new caller kit. I think
that doesn't confuse them and scare the hell out of them right from the first time they start reading it.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good. I use it at all my college schools. It's part of, you come to college school, one of the things you get is the new caller kit. Probably needs to be updated. In fact,
I think they just did that. And from what I read going through it, well, I'll tell you what, that would discourage the heck out of anybody wanting to be a caller. It would me, if it were me, just looking at that starter kit, I said, no way. So that's the point that I want to make there. I understand, like I said before, I'm kind of an old used up caller, but unfortunately I haven't forgotten everything that I've learned along the way. And Joe, I represent that hair part there. We don't, shut up. Okay.
Is that a part in your hair that's just a little wider than most? Is that? Yeah.
Don't worry about it, Joe. Our hormones have better things to do than grow hair, right?
Or you can put it, God only made so many perfect heads and the rest he covered with hair. So,
Okay, enough with the hair jokes.
Hair.
One of the most important things we can do right now in the activity is get as many new callers, competent new callers, into the activity and teaching new dancers. If you're going to have any chance at all of rebuilding this activity, you're going to have to simplify it. Henceforth, the SSD is a great idea. But you're going to have to work some nice, simple way to get these people that might enjoy being a caller into it. And we are so perfect at what we do and what we expect out of somebody that's just starting. It's like showing them challenge level dancing and say, how would you like to start in beginner square dance lessons? It's just not going to be very productive over the long haul. We need to drop back a little bit. I'll shut up. I know I'm preaching to the choir, so
one of the things we've talked about earlier in this series is first of all, accredited caller coaches go for it, Harlan. I think it's a great thing. And to me, I think the highest achievement I've had in CALLERLAB was to become an accredited caller coach. It really, you've got to show your stuff. It's not just handed to you. And I would like to thank Daryl Clendenin for, I guess, encouraging me. We were walking down the hall at CALLERLAB one year. Well, I'm bouncing all over the place here. Harlan, you and Joe have known each other for what, 31, 32 years because
35 years.
35. Daryl and I have known each other because of CALLERLAB for what, 45, 46 years.
Whenever you started, I started in 1975.
Well, I came to the second one. I wasn't invited to the first.
That was the second one,
Yeah.
1975.
Anyway, Daryl was walking down the hall one time and he said, "Come on to my room. We're going to have some scotch." And I said, "Okay, why?" And he said, "We're celebrating. I just had, was it the orals or the written that you had just taken?"
How long ago was that? I don't know.
And
It had to be the written because the orals I took with Bill Davis and Bill Peters and San Francisco.
Mine were with Mayo and Colton Fowler, and on the other side of the country.
Bill
But anyway,
Davis, I bet you that was a rigorous one.
yeah. And Mayo told me afterwards, if you hadn't passed, I'd have been so mad at you. But he wasn't being prejudiced. He was being, he was holding me to the guns. I was aiming at some point here. Oh, so what we talked about earlier is accredited schools by accredited caller coaches. And I think Dan may have led a discussion on this way back when. One of the things is caller coaches have this criteria of, or a thing of all these different things you've got to throw in because there's so many things we have to know. And as a result, the students get hit with a fire hose of stuff, and they're made aware of it and presented it, but not given a chance to really learn it. And there are schools now that specialize in singing call presentation or teaching or how to use mental image in a way that you can't do at a caller coach accredited school where they hit you with the fire hose. It's an interesting problem. As I tell people that I'm teaching mental image, don't expect to learn it in a day. Your dancers didn't learn to dance in one night. So it's an interesting problem.
Yeah, I mean, because the required components of the curriculum, you know, my syllabus is like that thick to cover all the different things, and doing it in 40 hours, which, you know, that's the recommended amount of time in 40 hours to have people come to a college school that's 40 hours long, which basically takes 3.5 days at least to, unless you're going to work 18 hours a day.
I think maybe
They're rigorous.
Sorry, Harlan, I hate to break in, but I think maybe everything needs to be updated. I think we need to have something virtual through CALLERLAB that maybe is starts here and progresses through. We need callers. I ran caller schools for so many years, and I know exactly the problem that they can. I've had so many new students come into a caller school say, "Well, I went to such and such school. They taught us how to find the call corner, but they didn't teach us how to call." So we need something that starts right at the very beginning and goes through, and like you said, gives them time to digest it and work on it on a regular basis at their own pace. And today, things are done on the virtual media. Let's face it, you know, we need to update to that somehow.
Yeah, I know the only one I know, Kip Garvey is doing an online school, and it has a bunch of different units, and you can go in at your leisure and do whatever unit you're working on. And I haven't talked to him since he started this, but he's the only caller I know who's doing a virtual caller school.
There are two of them.
Harlan, is he, is it face-to-face, or just does he record the sessions and then people sign up that they can look at him at their leisure?
It's not face-to-face as far as I know. I haven't looked at it. My understanding is that he does X number of units, and you can go in and take one unit one day or stretch it out. But I'll be seeing Kip in the near future. I'll ask him.
My impression is that it's that he started it before COVID, and that there's an online forum component and a lot of discussion in between students that happens in text form. And yeah, I was going to mention that I've taken 3 caller schools, and I don't want to rehash the stuff that we did 2 years ago. Three caller schools from accredited caller coaches. But if I had to choose a curriculum right now or a way to get people going, I would do something like Kip's thing in conjunction with something like Rich Reel's thing, where, because the part of calling that took me the longest to develop when I had a club thrust into my lap was the rhythm and the timing and the presentation stuff. And that doesn't seem to get there. There isn't enough space in the CALLERLAB curriculum to actually figure out how to address that. And I'm not sure anybody knows how to address that without a lot of practice.
It should be a part of the, I think, the knowledge base, Harlan. I think that's where it should go. To where
Daryl, you froze up.
Yeah.
the CALLERLAB can be directed to the knowledge base and say, well, here's a program. That's not to be in competition with the callers colleges and callers schools and what have you, but just something to get that ground level start for somebody that might save the activity.
Cece, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so I'm probably one of the newest callers in this small group. I just started in 18, and one of the things that I will say, COVID was one of the best things that happened as far as me learning to call, because all of these online resources appeared. Before that, I had to do one-on-one, had to seek out somebody, had to drive an hour and a half in order to get live training. One thing that Dawn, we talked about this, you wanted to know my thoughts on the difference of teaching and training. Well, here's the opportunity. Training requires live adjustment. You know, an apprentice goes to class for a couple hours or a week, and then has on-the-job training where he has a journeyman who's right there with him to make sure he's learning what he book learned and applying it. Real life application is different than book knowledge or reading about it or hearing about it. Actually doing it is the training part, and having somebody to go, okay, your timing's just a little bit off, fix it there. Or when you're presenting that song, you know, what are you trying to, you know, what are you trying to get across to your dancers? What emotion are you trying to evoke? So if you're trying to evoke that, then you have to portray that. That kind of training can't happen on paper. And so I've probably watched almost every single video of Mel's, and I've watched all of Dawn's. I communicate with different callers, even Daryl. I've been able to glean so much, and I've had people comment, you have come a long way in a short period of time because of all this online access. So,
some of this stuff you're talking about, CC, even with all this online access, is difficult to get, to have somebody standing next to you and reminding you that the music has a beat to it that you should be emphasizing with your voice and what have you.
Right. That's the difference between teaching and training. And I've been to a couple callers clinics. I had a mentor and we were doing a small group, pre-COVID. And the small group actually had way more benefit than going to caller school. As far as the caller school was great for the fire hose overview of all the different aspects you have to learn, but it's overwhelming.
My first caller school was Jim Mayo, and I thought I had to learn choreography, and he basically taught me nothing choreography wise. I learned that from knowing Jay King, but he taught me so much about calling that I didn't know existed. And again, it was a once a week, so you had time to digest and go back for more.
Another thing about recruiting new callers. I will tell you my experience thus far has been the older callers throw around all these names like us new callers know who they are. Just because we're a new caller doesn't mean we've danced forever. And throwing around the names gets to kind of be, I don't know if you remember your grandpa rattling off all these names and you had no idea who they were, how it applied, and a lot of information gets bogged down in the history. History is good, but not to the extent where like every 5 minutes we're talking about somebody did this. Teach me how to call, not all the history behind the call. Teach me how to use it. That's what I need. Then once I know how to use it, then you can teach me the history behind it. Because right now I need to know how to use it so I can have my dancers dancing, or I can teach them how to dance if I'm teaching.
I have a question for three of you, starting with Dan. We've been talking about we've got to get more callers in the activity. You're relatively new. What made you switch from dancer to caller, or add caller to your repertoire?
People pushed me into calling, I think, because they didn't want to dance with me.
A good pat answer, anyway.
But yeah, I think that I fell in love with the hobby and got a lot of encouragement from other dancers to call, and got pushed into it by the social situations of the club. And I think that if I had not had the Redwood Rainbows, that very vibrant club with a very vibrant culture, was both instrumental in pulling me into square dancing. Because the thing that got me into a Redwood Rainbows class was going to a traditional square dance night. And of course, that's a culture that we haven't seen in modern Western for probably 30 or 40 years. And I say we, but I'm new to this. But yeah, I think it was that the fellow dancers, I fell in love with modern Western, and then my fellow dancers said, you should be a caller, and pushed me into it.
I just noticed that we're past the 1 hour point. I want to do the typical 1 hour thing, and then we can continue, because I'd like to hear from CC and Yolanda what made them go through the transition. But once again, thank you guys for joining us on this Saturday. I forgot to look at my notes. It was something like the 80th or 85th or 70th. We've done a whole bunch of these, and it hardly seems that much already, but we've had a good history. Thank you guys for coming. A special thanks for Harlan for the great presentation on CALLERLAB, and wishing you luck, Harlan, on continuing with the caller coach thing, and also looking forward to talking to you about, I got my notes here. Daryl said dumb stuff. Harlan said dealing with problem people. No, I didn't mean it. Daryl talked about having a presentation where we all talked about dumb stuff that happened just to entertain ourselves. Boy, did that come out wrong. Okay. Thank you for laughing out loud, Yolanda. And again, if you only dedicated 1 hour to this session, feel free to leave without being embarrassed. Don't forget to make copies of the chat stuff, which I always forget to do because there's some good links in there. we've got 11 people online now, but we were up to 14 at one point. People just checking in, which was kind of nice. And I must have forgotten something, but anyway, so let's continue on. So, Cece, what made you do the transition from dancer to caller?
So our club caller got real sick and wasn't able to do lessons anymore. My son was actually my son and daughter both were working on being callers, and they were going to do it. And he passed away, so that didn't happen. And my daughter decided to go back to school to become a pharmacist. So that schedule didn't allow her to do it. And we went 1 year without lessons, and the club numbers started to dwindle. And I was like, well, I'm not going to be a caller, but I can teach people how to do the moves. And then, we'll just hire outside callers for dances and stuff. Well, my third class, I realized this isn't going to work. They have to be able to practice it. And that's how it started.
Great. Yolanda, what inspired you?
So it actually happened in the 80s. So I don't know how many of you guys know Karen and Greg, but my late husband and I wanted to do what they're doing. So and we at that time had a caller who was really encouraging us to do that, and was giving us like tapes and stuff, and we were allowed to ask questions. And then for medical reasons we had to leave the square dance scene. So when I came back, I asked, and did a goofers night and stuff. So
You're making me think about answering my question. I know Tech Squares, that I called for many years and is still going great after 50 years, after 50 something years, has an amateur night every summer. And when I was there and we used to do that, somebody would do a singing call or a patter call or some weird choreography or what have you. But it was a fun night and giving people a chance. But some of them have gone on to be callers. And I got into it having no thoughts of doing that. But one of the other guys in the club, this was the Haymakers at University of Massachusetts, one of the other guys filled in at a demo because the regular caller couldn't do it and memorized the singing call. And he was terrible. And so I said, if he can do it, so can I. And so I memorized the singing call and did it. But the amazing transition was, oh my God, power. You get to sing. You say jump and they jump. Granted, they don't jump as fast as the ones in your head do. It takes 2 seconds for them to react. And that was kind of a thing. But it was, I think maybe one of the things to do is to get people to do it somehow, like an amateur night, and make them realize that there's fun to this side of it also.
One of the challenges that I have with square dancing versus the kind of philosophical challenges versus, say, swing dancing or some of these others is that it is this kind of deeply hierarchical thing. And I think some of that derives from what we experienced post-World War II as a culture. But yeah, I think that the notion of having more people calling helps break that up a little bit and pass that baton around.
Chris Stacy left the session because he had an appointment, but Chris is one of those people that I think just academically, he started calling almost before he started dancing. He heard about it, he saw the academics of what was going on, and he thought that was pretty cool. One of the things I forgot to do is welcome Charlie. Charlie and I have been friends since before CALLERLAB. And I think probably, Charlie, you've been calling longer than I have, but I'm not sure. It's been pretty close. Charlie's a very successful and active caller in the southeastern Massachusetts area. We just haven't conned him into joining this for yet. Hopefully you'll join us again.
So I see that Joe, Mel, and Bill all have their hands up.
I didn't see that.
Shall
Joe,
we
you're
toss
first.
Joe in there first?
Yeah.
Okay, there I am, unmuted. Yeah, a couple of things. Quick CALLERLAB update possibly would be, as I remember, back in around 72, John Kaltenthaler, Earl Johnson, Al Brundage, Bill Peters, a number of callers got together initially first, maybe a dozen, and they tossed back and forth this idea of a caller association. And from there, each one of them went out and invited, I think, 2 more people that they thought would be good to the group. And I believe I was one of the ones in the second round. So I was back there back in the day when it did start. And for various reasons, there were part of the problem was that too many of the quote unquote professional callers were traveling around using too many calls for the home caller to put up with. The dancers would pressure the home callers to, why don't you do, Flippo did this last week and so-and-so did this, a month ago. Why don't you keep doing these things? So part of it was to try to standardize a list. We tried to control the experimentals that were going to be used, all kinds of things. So that, anyhow, so I might be in that 74 picture, I don't know. My start in the calling was, I had to be, because I was a music professor. It was one of my careers pre-calling. And I had a group that was, they were educable, but not tremendous. They learned by rote. And I just suggested, well, would you like to learn square dancing? They were gung-ho for it. So we did. 3 squares of kids. By the springtime, ended up going to teen conventions throughout New York and having a ball. Their parents got involved, and it grows. Part of the marketing thing is you got to get out there. You got to show it to people over and over again. What CC said about teaching and training is great. I've been a teacher trainer both probably all my life. One of my other careers was in aerospace aviation engineering, and in that realm I trained people, a lot of people. When you're talking about, and what CC said also was really good, is you need to learn calling, not the legacy, not the history, not name dropping and whatnot first. And one of the best ways is, what's the most important thing about calling? Rhythm. Okay, you got to have rhythm. You don't have to be a singer. You all probably remember Jack Lazary. How good of a singer was he? Okay, he was a performer, an entertainer. The first time I heard him, he was doing Billy, Why Don't My Dog Bite? It was atrocious. And but what a caller, what a teacher. He was definitely one of the top teachers I ever heard. My last stuff going on in Ontario, helping callers, because I've run caller schools probably for 50 years. Very much hands-on, very much mentoring. These callers would come to my dances. They would take, volumes of notes, blah, blah, blah. We would talk about it afterwards. We would do debriefs. I was lucky in Ontario, the Dancers Association, Toronto especially, and Eastern Square Dance Association, they would host dances for the new callers every month. These callers, well, twice a month actually, these callers would go out and they would call dances. And dancers would come specifically because they were new callers, and they were supporting. And what dancer doesn't want to say, I knew so-and-so when, you know? They love to do that. I've had them do that with me. It doesn't happen anymore because these people are dead. You know, there's nobody around that. That started when I
Did your
started.
calling do that to them, Joe? Or
Yeah, yeah. Well, unfortunately, yes. How many of you have had dancers expire on the floor? Yeah, you know, what a great history. Now, again with CC, saying some of these callers would drop names, and that's what it was, dropping names. And you can't make it all about you. It's got to be about the student. And, you know, so you got to start out getting them to sound like a caller, and you know, they can read all they want about choreography. If they can't handle the choreography by reading about it, they're probably not ready for it anyhow. So that's part of it. Oh, you know, and the first question I ask at a caller school is, why do you want to be a caller? You know, most of them can't really answer. I could not tell you why I wanted to be a caller. I think I think Don's answer was one of the best. Control, man, I have control. It's just, I don't know. It's a combination of the engineering and the music background and all that enticed me, I guess. So anyhow, I think that's probably about as much update as I need to give.
thank
I yield back to Bill and I think it was Mel, wasn't it?
Mel,
Yeah.
Mel's hand. Mel is Zoom has nicely put Mel in line next with hand up. Bill, yours is still.
Harlan, excellent presentation. Loved it. It's one that I think should be happening more and more often, probably a couple of times a year, at least, to say what's happening in CALLERLAB, what can CALLERLAB do for you, and various things. I've had a session. Don, I'm glad you've done it. I have asked for another session to come up on that, but you've done it, so I don't need to push on for another one. I do want to say, Cece, excellent comments. I loved what you said. There is a lot of that, and it is a very frequent thing that I hear. I haven't been doing caller schools for as long as everybody. I really did my first full-blown caller school about 98, 99 in that area. But feeding with a fire hose has always been the biggest problem. That was what my first caller school was the CALLERLAB curriculum for a caller school, and it was an absolute freaking nightmare as a teacher. And when you say, Harlan, you know, the CALLERLAB recommendation is 40 hours over the 3-day period. Now, when you think about that, that's what is that? 40 hours, 11.3 or 11.5 hours a day of teaching. That doesn't include lunch breaks. That doesn't include, except that doesn't include time for actual digesting or all of the rest of that kind of stuff. It is way, way, way too much. But in order to get the support from CALLERLAB, you have to have an accredited coach. You have to use the CALLERLAB curriculum. It's wrong, and that has to be fixed. And I'm not going to go into that. One of the biggest things that I've heard is compliments on Don, your sessions, and I get the same thing from mine. And it was one of the biggest criticisms on the GSI presentations was that Don, you and I, we allow and encourage the discussion on the topic. And I use the topic of modules as an example on the CALLERLAB curriculum. You've got 2 hours set aside for that. We did what, 7, 8 presentations, 1 hour long, and the discussion on the longest one was 14 hours after that, and I had to cut it because I was falling asleep because I was at Dawn session. You know, I was basically online for over 24 hours straight, just discussing one aspect of one topic. Most of these sessions, Don, you have a presentation today on CALLERLAB. Harlan, what you gave today, fantastic. When you look at all of the aspects are there, and here we are experienced callers, and we're an hour of discussion on that topic alone, and there's still no practice. CC said very succinctly, we need the time to learn how to call. All the information is great, but the time to step back and say, formation management. Oh yeah, okay, what is that? Who cares? How do I move a dancer? What does this? What does it? You know, we'll get to that part later. Here's an introduction to it. Here's how we practice it. Now get up and practice it step by step by step by step. And that's where color school should be, because you can take 5 or 6 color school. Dan, I think you said this in that session on color school. You had attended at that time 3 color schools, and they were pretty much all exactly the same color school, the same material being presented. It didn't help you to progress. I love color schools because of the social aspect, the networking aspect, and those aspects. That is the most invaluable part of it. And yeah, it is a lot of resources. And yeah, a lot of work has to be done by the callers, but the way it's formatted, the way it's presented, I think is absolutely wrong. And it's daunting for new callers. It's not a step-by-step thing. And CC, I also, Joe, I had a long list, but Joe, you covered most of them very succinctly than I did, so I won't go over them. But I agree with you also on the name dropping aspect. I have done that myself sometimes. I love sharing the experience when I have somebody that's actually shared those experiences that have gone. When I started calling in Germany, one of the names that was dropped all the time was Don Beck. Who the heck is Don Beck? Oh, he does this mental image thing where, you basically just close your eyes and call to the dancer. You know where everybody is all the time. And I'm going, well, that had absolutely no meaning to me whatsoever. When I hear things like Don Beck and Hap Pope and Jim Mayo and John Coltonthal, I had no idea who these people are because I was in Germany. The same thing is happening today. We want new callers. We want somebody to come in and say, hey, you're going good. And my last suggestion also was the caller mentoring program that you have. I would love to see on that more focus on the difference between caller, like criticizing a caller, like offering constructive criticism and offering critique, because that is something that is not understood well. Anyway, I've rambled enough. Thank you. Great presentation.
I'm going to do something that, well, since my wife's not sitting here and telling me to shut up like I always do, I'm going to jump in before Bill, because I do want to comment on stuff that Mel was saying, or on the training versus teaching, or what have you. I do online mental image groups. Most of you know it. Many of you have been through it. We do 20 to 30 lessons over 20 to 30 week period, 5 to 10 students. I'm on my 6th group. And I start these off, at least I should, that choreographic management is but one small part of calling. And mental image is but one really small part of choreographic management. But that's what we're going to learn here if you want to learn that. And what I tell people, and it unfortunately true, I can teach you the basics, and it takes a long time, a little at a time, but I can't figure out through Zoom how to teach it in real time.
Yeah.
How to make it so you can actually get up on the floor and use it. There's, just like all the other aspects, rhythm, etc. You've got to, I'm not sure how we as trainers can translate that into real time unless it's a one-on-one session and you're just thing, and that's still hard too. Stuff we got to work on, and some of our discussions here are making us head in that direction. Anyway, Bill, thank you for being patient. Go for it.
Hey, not a problem. Harlan, great discussion. Brought back a lot of memories of my involvement with CALLERLAB. I'm listening to Dawn and a few of the others on there. What got them in the transition? I started square dancing in 1977, and calling fascinated me from the first night I started taking lessons to learn to dance, because the singing calls, the singing part of it, I sang in school, so it was a big part of me. And I asked that caller, how do you become a caller? He said, give yourself at least 3 years of dancing before you call, because you're going to be a teacher also. And I never took what you would call the quintessential caller school. You know, I went to a caller in Sacramento. His name was Roger Morris. He occasionally taught small classes at his dance studio and that he owned. And we met for 8 weeks every Sunday, about 6 of us. And if nothing else, one of the things I always remember, he said, when you go out there, try to get yourself hired by a club right off the bat. You're green, you're going to make mistakes, and people don't forget. Get a bunch of people together who don't know how to square dance because they don't know you don't know what you're doing. And I did that, and then I joined CALLERLAB I started calling in 81. I joined CALLERLAB in 85, went to my first convention in Phoenix. And, you know, someone mentioned John Kaltenhalter, or John K, I guess we all called him. I remember he was up there at that podium every time with the same expression. No badge, no meal, no exception. We had that drilled into our head. But it was on-the-job training for me for all the years I called, and then it was successful, but all good things had to come to an end. But I think listening to Don's stories and listening to Cece and Yolanda, how they started, it brought back a lot of reminiscing about how it started for me. So that's about all I got to say. Thank you.
Interesting that you, and I've known people like this, started dancing and were fascinated by calling and knew you wanted to be a caller. I had been dancing for several years, mostly traditional and then Western, and I thought you had to be born that way to be a caller. But this one particular opportunity made me do it, and then it was strictly singing calls for 2 years until I had to call pattern. It just wasn't my thing. Harlan, you've had your hand up.
A couple things. The way I got started calling is really interesting. Is we were going to have a class, and the caller got very ill the Friday before the class with a serious illness, not like a long-term illness, so that they were going to be out of commission. And anyway, so we said, what are we going to do? And we had some Lee Cotman basic teach tapes. And they said, well, Harlan, you've been doing tape groups. Why don't you just use these Lee Cotman teach tapes and for the class on Monday? And you can do the class with teach tapes. And I said, okay. And Sunday night, I just have no new dancers going to have a whole lot of fun dancing teach tapes. And so I called up a caller friend of mine, Mike, the sisters of Mike, how do you resolve a square? And so, and then the next night I went in and plugged in the microphone and started calling. And I started calling by teaching a beginner class. And I learned so much by teaching that first beginner class. And 3 months later, I was calling 5 times a week. But I was just going to comment about caller school. One thing I've been thinking, because I've done several like 40-hour caller schools and 35-hour caller school, but 2 or 3 day caller schools, usually 3.5 days. They're intense, and by the time you're done teaching them, you're exhausted, and I'm sure the students are twice as exhausted of doing caller school on a series of Saturdays rather than 40 hours or whatever man hours you want to do in 2 or 3 days or 4 days. And so, and looking at, because that way you do 1 day of work with them and they have a week to think about it, and they come back with more questions, and you do the second day and they have another week. And so, and I'm figuring I will get many, if I do this, I'll get many emails or phone calls during the week in between. And so doing it over 3 or 4 Saturdays rather than intense 3 or 4 days. So I don't know that. And just having this discussion today, I remember one of the very first color school I ever taught was in Joe Ubelocker's living room.
Harlan, you're very busy calling. What do you do in your spare time? Somebody told me, I think, that you were a special ed teacher. Was that a past thing or what have you?
I'm old. I'm possibly the oldest one here.
I doubt it. Let me ask, how old are you?
I'm about to turn, I'll be 76 in December.
And I'll be 83 in the end of the month. So you're just
Okay,
a kid.
you got me beat out. But I was right now, okay, we'll go start at the beginning. I was a special ed teacher, K1 severely emotionally disturbed for 22 years. Then I was a principal for 7 years. Somewhere along the lines there, I got my doctorate, and I was a assistant superintendent for the last 11 years. I worked in the schools, and then I retired. And when I retired, I started gardening a lot. And I dealt with this one garden center, and one day, not too long before the pandemic, they had a sign up, they needed extra help. And I have plenty of spare time. So I started working at the garden center 2 or 3 days a week, and the pandemic hit, and they said, we want to put you on full time, because it got really, people stayed home and garden. And so they put me on full time, and a month later they made me supervisor of the yard. So I'm now back working 40 hours a week in the daytime and calling at night. So that's what I do. What else do I do?
My sister was a special ed teacher also, and I can imagine that some of the things you've learned during that period really help in teaching square dancing
It
too.
really helps in teaching square dancing. Trust me, it really helps. Actually, what helps, one of the things I've found is there are some very, very, very good callers, some very famous and good callers who don't know a thing about teaching. And you have to have a real understanding of teaching and learning to teach a square dance class. So I've gone to a class taught by, like I said, really, really famous, good callers who I admire, and say, they don't know how to teach.
I've gone to some who will say, you know, you do this. Well, how do you do it? Well, you know, just try it, and if it works for you, do it. One particular thing I was trying to perfect, I'd watched a lot of others and what have you, and then I went to Jim Mayo, who was my mentor, and said, how do you do this? And he said, well, you do this. Well, I tried that. You do this, I tried that. And by the fifth thing he got to, you do this. Oh, I'll try that. And it worked. And at one point I said to Jim, how come, not relative to this problem, but in general, when others tell me to ask others how to do something, I don't get much of an answer. When I ask you how to do something, you're able to tell me. And he said, well, if I got this dummy, he was talking about himself, to learn how to do it, I've learned how to teach anybody how to do it. So.
Okay, I'm going to have to wrap up in a little bit, because I have it's 11:33 here, and I have to head out by 12.
Well,
Hey,
yeah,
I was about to say, I'll take my hand down. It's been up too long already. But I am going to have to leave too. I have a couple of hornet's nests that I need to kick. But I did want to say, Harlan, very nice presentation. Thank you for the opportunity to reminisce, if nothing else. But everybody, have a good week.
By the way, they still say no badge, no meal, no exception.
Certainly
Mad,
not,
so
yeah.
food, no exception.
That's right. I'll never forget that one. All right, kids. For me, bye-bye.
Thanks
Okay,
for
bye.
participating, Daryl, and as usual, thanks for coming. Oh, now I can see 9 people on the screen, except for Charlie. Your thing's been flashing all the time. You're just trying to get attention.
Charlie's a flasher.
Just as a note, there's 2 online caller schools. One was Kip Garvey's, the other one was Eddie Powell that was working. I put the contact details in the chat, just if you're looking at a reference for them. Both Kip and Ed, Kip does most of his correspondence online, email, or text chat or telephone, but he can set up individual sessions. He does that with his dancers, and Eddie does the same thing with video displays, and they are work at your own pace. Kip's charges by the session, and they're definitely well worth it.
Tom Miller has been up until recently doing one-on-ones and charging by the session also, and I've heard good reports from people that have had his coaching.
I had a chat with Tom. He does a lot of structured things, and he does individually structured for if you want to do a progressive thing, or if you just want to look at one aspect or just have improvement. He does the one-on-one sessions, which are tailored, each session tailored for the individual, which is really nice.
We should also thank Mel for having put on Zoom sessions with all sorts of good topics and people. The one problem with Mel's session, with these sessions, but even more so with Mel, is they don't know how to keep it to an hour. They go on and on.
I have always been a firm believer that the presentation is about 45 minutes, 15 minutes discussions, questions. The presenters, I let them know if they have a timeline. They usually stick around for an hour. Sometimes they stick around for a lot longer, and then it goes into open discussion form, which is one of the reasons why they do go on as long as they do, is because sometimes the presentation topic is finished in an hour and a half, and 3 other detailed topics start getting, which is actually what today's topic is about, is something that came up, especially for new callers, having a problem with what they're being taught as learning to call, as opposed to learning to actually move dancers, and formation management, what they're taught it is and what it isn't, and why it was getting confused. So that leads to
Harlan,
another
the thing
session.
I remember.
Go ahead, Bill.
You went silent, Bill.
Oh, no, that
Because I just got a little thing said my internet was unstable. Oh my God, I'm unstable. No, never mind. I remember I went to that first CALLERLAB convention in Phoenix in '85 that I went to. I'd only been calling for 3 years. And back then, that was the other thing too, Harlan. If I recall right, you had to be calling 3 years before you could join CALLERLAB. Am my recollection is wrong?
This goes back to the thing that came out today, the vote that came out today is to be a full member, you have to be calling 3 years.
Yeah, okay.
But
Yeah.
to be an associate, affiliate member, apprentice member, you can have 0 to 3 years, but you couldn't vote and be on committees. As of today, it's been passed by the membership that apprentice members can serve on committees and can vote on committee business. So that makes it more attractive to newer callers.
Yeah, because back in when I first joined, they didn't have the apprentice callers for the first 3 years. You had to, but I remember that first convention, and I walk into here's the giants of the calling business were there, and if somebody had told me they're going to change the rules for Alaman left to do it with a right hand, okay, I'll go along with that. Later on, I was like, are you kidding?
Hey, just on that, Harlan, here's a question on the vote that went on as far as the membership goes, and I understand that, but putting a time on years is in my opinion, a bit of a misnomer. We have a caller here that has been calling when he was calling 3 years, but he was also calling 5 nights a week. And we have callers that have been calling for 20 years that call maybe 1 or 2 tips a month, but they're all members of the callers, and this is how long they've been callers. So it experience is relative, but I understand a criteria had to be drawn somewhere. My question is essentially, there was a comment that was made, and I was asked this question. I said, you're going to have to ask them. As a associate member, you've got everything except voting privileges, unless you're serving on a committee, and access to the financial and other documents.
Yeah.
Which is, if you are an associate member, you can attend those meetings. You have access to all those things. You just don't have a vote. And those are public documents. Why is that restricted?
Well, let me check one thing too, because I'm working on a revision of the bylaws, and I just want to look at something really. Okay.
It was just such an anomalous statement of what you could and couldn't have access to, especially when they're public documents. And I went, what? That just made no sense.
Okay. Apprentice member. Okay.
Memory has it at the beginning, while you're looking, Harlan, that there were 100 callers at the first convention, and they were trying to limit the growth to a controlled way, so each of those callers could invite 2 new people, and then the following year each of the new people could also invite 2 more and build, and then eventually it got to, come on, anybody can join. Okay. We want more people.
Yeah. I just had to double check the bylaws on something. A person can be calling less than 3 years and become a full member if they are, let me go back and actually read it to you. Okay, if they have, a person can become a full member if they have called 12 dances during the previous 3 years. So if someone calls 12 dances their first year of calling, they meet that criteria. So the apprentice people are people who are calling who 3 years or less and have not called 12 dances during that period.
Yeah, it's just the vote that went out didn't have those explanations of the bylaws. And generally when you have a resolution pass, if it's in charter on a constitution or on existing bylaw, if a resolution is passed by general membership, it overrides a bylaw if it is applicable to that specific bylaw. That's just your constitutional arrangements and legal arrangements. So it was one of those anomalous things that sort of flipped the bylaw on its head and flipped the explanation on its head. So it was just sitting in the back of mine. I figured I'd ask you because you're in the position to do something about it.
Yeah. And the big thing is both with this thing of changing it so associate apprentice members can be on committees and vote on committee is making, more inclusive. And if you know, if you're calling 12 dances a year, you qualify. So I would have qualified 3 months after I started calling. But the big thing is, like at the beginning, to get in CALLERLAB, you had to be invited by a member, and it's gradually opened up over the years. So,
yeah, I know. I was sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Dan. I had another question. He's busy coughing. Damn COVID. Totally off subject, but it just struck me. When is the National Square Dance Convention?
It's in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
In Evansville, Indiana. Well, let's see. Let me check my calendar for sure. See, it starts on Wednesday night.
What's the date?
It starts on Wednesday. It's actually, I guess,
June,
3 weeks. It starts on June 22nd. Wednesday the 22nd. It's the 22nd, 23rd, 24th, and 25th. Evansville, Indiana. The trail and dance is the 22nd and the full convention starts the 23rd.
The reason I ask is we should not have one of these sessions that weekend. And I'm just checking to see if we had anybody booked. No, we don't. We got somebody for the week before, but not that weekend. Ooh, good. We will not be meeting during the. You guys are welcome to go to the national instead of showing up here. Dan, are you done coughing?
I am indeed done coughing, yes, for the moment.
Did you have something to say? I thought you did.
No.
Oh,
No, I
okay.
was just coughing.
Oh. Let me type this in here. National Convention.
Yeah, 71st, 2820 Alexander Pike, Anderson, Indiana. That's where you send the registration forms to.
I am super bummed to have missed the IAG-SDC convention this year. And of course, I got COVID from other sources, but as I watch all of my Facebook friends report positive tests on returning from that, I'm kind of still wanting to hole up and stay.
I also heard that the New England Square Dance Convention several weeks ago, I wish Charlie were still here to confirm it, that there were quite a few people got COVID there. So I'm.
Well, same thing happened at nationals here in Australia.
What about CALLERLAB this year, Harlan? Do you know of any spreading there? This was
No, that was, as far as I know, as of yesterday, one person who was there then went to a square dance convention the next weekend, and after that convention tested positive. So it's not directly related to CALLERLAB, but yeah, one person who was at the CALLERLAB convention went from CALLERLAB to the Northeast, I guess it was the Northeast convention, right?
Yep.
New England Square Dance Convention?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then after returning from that, tested positive.
Yeah, there were quite a few talking to people, I guess it was at our local Callers Association, which now that they're on Zoom, I go to again since I've moved.
Okay.
But they said, well, I know of two, and somebody else said, well, I know of two others, and somebody said, yeah. So again, this was the first CALLERLAB convention that I had to miss, other than the very first one that I wasn't invited to. And it was very sad to miss it, but still being COVID cautious.
Okay, and I'm going to have to wrap up in a couple minutes.
We should all do that unless somebody really has something else to say.
I think we've hit one of those lulls in the conversation.
Harlan, thanks again. And I think I told you before, the discussion afterwards is always very interesting.
Yeah. I do have one closing question for Mel.
Yes, sir.
What would make CALLERLAB more appealing to people in Australia?
There's a mythos that is surrounding CALLERLAB, but it's not just Australia. It's an international thing of it's very American centric, and it's a very, well, I'm not going to be diplomatic. I'm just going to say it the way it's said to me. There is a lot of concern over the comments that come back from a lot of callers and a lot of dancers in the States that say, oh, well, if I called that there, my dancers wouldn't be able to do that. That's not how it's done. That's not normal dancing. Whereas, for instance, swing through recycle, Germany, that's only danced on days that end with the letter Y at a basic mainstream level. The same thing happens in a lot of places in Australia, but that slow transition of what happened in the States is filtering down the rest of the international. CALLERLAB used to do mini labs here. There was a lot of draw, but it was the reality of the mythos of CALLERLAB as opposed to the benefits and the understanding of what it did wasn't there. And there was really no purpose in joining CALLERLAB because it didn't do anything for anybody here in Australia. that's what had to change. And, you know, I've been doing that as a heavy marketing here in Australia and on the international side as well. But that's just a perception. And we both know that people's perception is their reality.
Yeah. One of the things I've been focusing on is trying to get CALLERLAB more appealing to international callers. And Tom Rayner, who's head of the International Advisory Committee, actually has been having regular meetings on Zoom. And I think that's been really good. I've ended up giving him the Chairman's Award for his work in helping get the international community more involved. And I'm just looking at ways to do that, because yes, I agree, it is very US centric, and we need to break.
Well, I had a question from a very renowned caller teacher in the States who was a former member of the CALLERLAB board, asking me when the International Callers Group Callers Committee meets, and you know how regular their sessions and what are they talking about. I had no idea because I've never been invited to one. I talked to Mickey about this last week. He's going to be passing on the message, and hopefully I can get an invitation to the meeting so I can find out what is going on.
I will see that happens.
But it is, as I said, it's a mystique about what it is. There's its international callers. We did an unofficial poll looking at how many callers are there, how many square dance groups, and how many dancers. And it was a generalized perception of fear that if every international caller registered at CALLERLAB, there would be more international callers than there are American callers in CALLERLAB. And well, why is this happening? Now we all know that's not true, because there's a lot of American callers that aren't members of CALLERLAB as well, and there's a lot of other things. But those are the kinds of things. If that's done on a statistical basis, just with an unofficial survey, that tells me that there's a big misunderstanding about what CALLERLAB can do, and why aren't these voices being heard? Why aren't they participating? And that's a presentation of self. We as callers do absolute crap at marketing ourselves, especially to other callers.
I've had a wonderful education by running these groups and my mental image groups. I've had people from 4 continents and 9 countries participating. And one was mostly Australians, and one was mostly Japanese, and a lot of European countries. And it's very interesting to hear our common language have different accents, you know, different standard applications, as you would. And I think it's been great to see these different people in my groups get to know each other and help a little bit in evening this out. But Harlan, that was an excellent question to ask. What can be done?
It's along the same line as the accredited caller coaches. In Europe, you have a number of accredited caller coaches. In Australia, we have one. That's Steve Turner. When Randy Page was coming over, I had started doing the work and everything else, and both of them were going to be sitting down and working to do the testing and assessing of me at the convention, which unfortunately got canceled. But looking at that, I started looking at the criteria of meeting that, my own personal circumstances of what's going on. I would not be able to meet the criteria to maintain that, which meant that I would have to resit that, do this every year or every 2 years. At what cost? And we've got guys like Harlan Kerr and Barry Watson, Steve Turner, Matthew Mill, everywhere you go, there are phenomenal callers, phenomenal instructors and caller teachers that are not accredited coaches. Don, I don't know if your accreditation is still valid, or did you renew it?
You have to renew every 4 years or so. And I did the first time, and the second time there was just too much paperwork.
Yeah, and this
God,
is
I
what,
didn't keep track, and I regret that, because I would have qualified for emeritus, and as it is, I had.
Yeah, and this is what I'm saying. Like right now, if for instance, if Don and I got together and we ran a caller school, or be it online or be it in person, we would not be qualified for the CALLERLAB support for that caller school, because neither one of us are accredited caller coaches. But yet both of us have run a number of caller schools, and I don't know of too many caller schools that wouldn't be happy to say, hey, Don, are you interested in coming over and doing a caller school on mental image calling or on this or on that? That's not on the curriculum, sorry, other than a 5-minute, this is one of the forms of calling.
I actually did get to go to several in Germany and one in Sweden, and got another one on the books for Germany if COVID lets it happen.
As do I. Yeah.
But you know, caller coaches said, you know, you were a caller coach for 8 years, and at that point, because of the paperwork, you obviously forgot everything, and you're no longer qualified to teach.
Yeah.
Just a personal bitter point. Sorry about that.
And don't get me wrong on this, because I am a full supporter of there needs to be a quality control standard for callers. When I heard that Europe got rid of the white badge, black badge accreditation for their quality control, I was actually a little disappointed in that, because it always put to me that the focus of CALLERLAB, the accreditation, the teaching, the qualification of calling was focused on the dancers, making sure that they had a good quality program and presenters that were able to carry that and carry a dance, as opposed to, if you want to be a caller as a member of Callers Association, you pay your membership. Doesn't matter if you've ever called before, you only call, you know, one singing call at a Christmas dance once every year. You can be a member of the Callers Association, you're a caller.
Every Callers Association has different things. I got one guy in my mental image class that is thinking about being a caller and was just interested. He's there just to learn the technical end of one aspect. He knows that it's limited, but he's interested academically. We've got topic for another discussion at some point, but I don't want to keep Harlan. He's been trying to bow out. He's got other things, and if we let him go, maybe he'll come back again sometime. If we don't,
yeah, if I have a free Saturday, for sure.
Same link, same time every Saturday, except for holiday weekends in the U.S. and national conventions and caller labs and things. And I think I'm gonna bow out at this point too. It's only been 2 hours, Mel. We're not going to set any records today.
Okay. Well, everyone have a good day. It was great being with you.
Thanks.
Have a good one. Thanks,
Don, can you just hang on just a sec?
Sure, no problem.
See you, Harlan.
Okay.
Shall I stop the recording before this conversation happens?
Oh, no, it's fine. I was just going to ask. I've been talking.
Joe, were you waving goodbye or
I was waving goodbye to
Harlan?
To Harlan, yeah.
Okay.
Now, I was just curious. We've been doing these sessions weekly, and I've been doing my sessions weekly as well. The numbers are dwindling. I think what did we have in the last? I think only about 20 or 30 people in. I was looking at maybe cutting those down to once a month or once every fortnight. Mainly because I'm running out of topics. And I mean, don't get me wrong, definitely go over a lot of these topics over and over and over again, and new things pop up. But I'm looking at cutting my sessions down, and I was just wondering, are you finding the same kind of thing, that it is becoming a bit cumbersome? We get the same group, we do a new caller session, we get, you know, maybe 2 or 3 new callers. I mean, it was great to have Yolanda, CC, and whatnot here today, but we're not getting the draw that we were getting.
Well, you've always gotten a larger draw than we have here. We had 14 people today. We've been averaging 15 to 20. I think last week with our teaching thing, we were up to 21, was the largest in a while. Dan and I have discussed off and on whether we want to keep going. I still enjoy doing them.
I love doing it, but I'm thinking I'm just going to cut it down to
the work problem is for me to find presenters, is to get around to calling people. Although I've got 3 or 4 solid presentations coming up soon, and a few others that are saying probably we just have to pick a date. So if we ever did cut back and you went to once a month, we could consider going, 2 weeks from yours. You do every 2 weeks. You do you know,
Well, that's what I was
first-
thinking of. I didn't know if
Yeah.
you were looking, and please don't think that there's any pressure on that. I think that I personally think there's not enough of these types of sessions, and especially since they are recorded, and both Dan and Mark do a great job making sure that they are available for everybody to watch after the fact as well. And that's where most of the watchers are. But if you were thinking about it, that's what I would look at is, you know, 1 week, 1 week, 1 week, 1 week. It'll
Gail, my wife, always says, "No, just keep them going. You know, you're getting a lot out of it." So she wants me to be active.
Yeah.
I've looked at some of the information on ours, and I'm pleased to see how many people actually go back and look at the videos.
Okay.
I haven't looked to see how many of your videos were watched. Dan, have you looked at any more of the statistics? I know when you look at statistics, you can tell not only how many people have seen it, but how many people watch 5 minutes and how many watch an hour of it. You're muted.
Thank you. I haven't, although I keep getting the, hey, you have, you know, another couple 1,000 hours of watches in the last month, messages from YouTube. So between this and the other long form session that I host, there's definitely a lot of stuff going on there. Yeah, I know that when I go back and listen to them, I usually get in about an hour and a half, and then I say, okay, I've probably caught all of it needs to get caught.
I end up not going back and listening to any of them. They keep wanting to, and just, you know, life gets in the way, retirement gets in the way, lunch gets in the way. I'm not sure I've listened to any but one of yours, Mel. You know, as much as I want to, I don't get around to it. And
No, that's fine. Like what I've noticed is on the, like, I've been doing these now, it's just over 3 years, almost 4 years now, that we've been doing it. We've been recording them for 2 years. And even the watches where you'd get something like 80, 90, 100, 200 views on what was, I was just looking at the last one, you know, 15 views on the last one, and people come in and occasionally pick this up, or what they'll do is they'll download the resources, download the video. That's it. That doesn't count as a view, or it doesn't record. I don't know how to do all those other kinds of things, how many downloads or counts, but is it still a viable thing for me to do every week? And I was just looking at that, and I was wondering if you were going to be cutting down. I didn't want to be in competition or things like that if we change hours, depending what it is. So if you were going to stop doing it or do it every fortnight, I didn't want to work in conflict with you. I'll work opposite you.
First of all,
something to think about.
I want to thank you for for not having sleep on weekends and joining us on a regular basis, because that does add a international perspective nicely. Dan, what are your thoughts on what Mel's saying?
Well, you know, I've kind of been saying things about having my Saturdays back for a while, and going back to one or so. Of course, now that I've had COVID, I'm like, okay, maybe I need to hunker down more. But it's, yeah, I think if we went to one a month, that would probably fulfill my needs to keep going.
We have, I'm just looking, we've had 85 sessions. Attendance for the last ones today, 14, last time 21, 19, 16, 15, 14, 21, 24. Who was 24? Ed Foote. 18 for David Millstone. But it's always nice when we end up getting some new people, like Charlie Trapp joined us this time. Hopefully he'll come back for some of the others also. It's like getting square dancers to come, but as I'm enjoying it and have been trying to let people know, we've got a social group here. This is fun.
I have something to contribute here, Don.
Yes, Joe.
One of the things I used to do at my college schools, and I guess if I was still doing them, or if I restart here, I would, I had a category for dancers to participate because not only as, dancers, live dancers for the callers to work with, uh, I had a category for dancers to take the caller training, um, just because a lot of people are interested in what goes on behind the mic. And these people became they became better dancers, better um, what you call it, marketing people in terms of getting other people involved in dancing. So that's one possibility. Um, one of the things I just thought of possibly is having a sessions with dancers as dancers, real 8 people, and where we can call and have the beginner callers call, and we can do um, live critique as we go, live explanations as to why, starting right from the beginning. Now, I don't know if that's something that anybody would be interested in doing.
Yeah, we are doing some of those.
You are? Okay.
Yeah, we have done some of those. We have found that learning to sync the music and the calling and everything else on Zoom, especially for somebody like me, that I only found out last week that if you hit original sound, it makes a difference. But yeah, what is generally becoming is there'd be the presentation where I'll sit back, I'll listen to it, I'll listen to how it is, but getting somebody to actually stand up and record themselves calling and getting that set so I can see I like to see the whole body, not just the person sitting in a chair, and doing those kinds of critiques. But there's not a lot of, I think I've got seven people that actually take me up on that offer. Tom has a number of them. He had a lot of people calling him up to do that. And I've got a lot, Tom Miller.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I talked to him quite a while ago about doing that, and he's offered that service for quite a while. But I don't think we've done anything formal. But what I have been doing is really encouraging some of the new callers. Yolanda, I think you have a group of 4 that you get together and you'll present or work with each other on different topics, including self-critique and open and honest critique. What's good, what's bad, what needs to be improved on. I don't know if you're still doing that or not, but it is something that I really strongly encourage is self-assessment, self-development in conjunction with guided development. Okay. Yolanda, are you guys still doing that?
Not quite as much, no. So one of the things with the new callers is that I think they would prefer, as they're learning, not to have it go on a recorded basis where everybody can see how they started out.
Well, that's why they're mostly offline off these sessions. Is most of them don't want to have it recorded, and it takes a lot for me to convince them that you do want to have it recorded on your own system, because there is nothing better than it's like watching your children grow. You don't see how fast they grow, but if you look at the marks on the wall, you see where those marks are, and you never do that to yourself until you actually go back and listen to your early recordings. That's why it's so important to record them, just to say, oh, wow, I actually have come a long way.
Yeah, I'm actually very lucky that I'm in a smaller group at the moment. We were large to begin with, and it's dwindled down, but that I'm allowed to record, and I have a homework assignment where I have to present a tip every week, but I think I need to get the guts up to get more critique. But I don't know how to send the session. Like, part of it is that I'm still learning computer stuff, so I don't know how to send one of my sessions to somebody else to do that.
They pretty much have to be cloud because they're so big. But it's one of those. I loved what Cece said. She asked a comment which I thought went totally ignored, but it was something that I used to ask in my caller schools when I was mentoring somebody on singing call presentation. The first thing I would ask is, what emotional message do you want to portray? And that was first off with the singing call. And then sometimes it would be, okay, well, we're going to do, I don't know, Brandy, the song Brandy, Girl in the Sailor. Right. What message do you want to portray with that? Okay. And I would give them an emotion that they want to actually, okay. So I want you to portray anger, and then I want somebody else to do the same thing. I want you to produce sadness or loneliness. I want you to produce hilarity, all using the same song, and actually try and get them to get these emotions. It's hilarious watching some of the outcomes, but it is good because it shows you how to actually force these emotional presentations, because each song you want to be a story rather than just a song to listen to. And that's a comment that she made that I wish I had grabbed it at the time. I've got it written down, but it is something to talk about.
I love that.
I think if you and this is of course being recorded. Shoot.
No, it's not.
So
Oh.
so I am not as honest because there's other callers that also don't want their so
Absolutely correct, Yolanda. There's a lot of callers that do not want themselves to be recorded, especially at this stage. They'd rather have the session, do the presentation, but they don't want it recorded anywhere.
And for the sake of conversation, shall I turn off the recording?
that might be, yeah.